Welcome to Real Booked with Lindsey and Bea, where we reflect on the parallels between bestsellers and blockbusters for laughs and social disruption. I'm Bea Jordan of BlueCouchLibrary.com, and I read the book.
And I'm Lindsey Howie of MyRelationshipWin.com, and I watched the movie.
Hello, Bea.
Hi, Lindsey.
How are you today?
I'm good.
That's wonderful.
I'm thrilled to be finished reading this book.
I am very excited to talk through this movie with you. This week I watched Life of Pi by Ang Lee, and it came out in 2012.
Oh, okay. So the book, Life of Pi, was written by Yann Martel, and it was published in 2001.
So there's a nice age gap between the two.
Yeah.
I had this movie recommended to me by my grandma or my aunt or someone, and I just never really sought it out. So it was interesting to kind of watch it the first time around. Yeah, it was interesting. How did you take the book?
Okay, so I read it a handful of years ago, and I had a completely cold reading. I did not know anything about it except for what is on the cover, which is a tiger and a boy. And I'm like, okay, and a boat. I'm like, all right, I'm getting it. I hadn't even watched a movie trailer. That was when the movie came out, was when I read the book. And so I didn't recognize that it was primarily allegorical. So I was just reading it like a literal story.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, wow, there's a lot of setup, because it's like the whole first half of the book is before they are stranded on a lifeboat. There's a lot of setup here. That's cool. This kid's kind of weird. All right, we can talk about zoo animals and also, okay, you making points that I don't agree with. That's fine. Let's move on to the story. And then the story part was rather straightforward. Just a straightforward survival story. And then you get to the ending, which is ambiguous. Like, did this happen, or which story do you choose to believe? And again, having not recognized that I was not reading a beach read.
Right.
It's like, what the heck is this? I hate it.
It was very much Schrodinger's story.
So
it's both alive and dead at the same time.
I thought that having a few years behind me and knowing that it was allegorical and being able to, understanding that the points that it's making are in the setup, which isn't just story setup, so that you can get to know the character. There's some of that development, but it's also he's making his points for you to ponder. I thought that I would enjoy it more. But it's just, it feels smug. He's the author. It feels like the author is on the other side of the book, like super villain style, petting his goatee.
Oh my goodness. Oh my god.
Yes,
okay.
You're so clever. All right, that's fine. Also, full disclosure, this is about religion and having my background being carrying baggage from being raised in a religious environment. No, I just fundamentally disagree with this as a beautiful thing.
So the setup that I saw was Pi claiming his nickname and exploring 3 different religions simultaneously.
Yeah, no, those were. I think that what you got was snippets of what's actually in the book. So we have some talk about how animals in the zoos are equally as free or better off than animals in the wild, and the philosophical debate about freedom versus safety sort of thing.
Nope, none of that.
So if you are talking about animals in a zoo or in an environment in which they are in captivity for the entertainment of humans, it's I fundamentally disagree with everything this person is saying. if we're extrapolating and we're talking about the human condition and safety versus freedom, and I mean, being an American, the concept of freedom is one that we hear pretty consistently, and yet
What a concept!
yeah. So it's interesting, but it's, I don't know. It does explore 3 different religions at once, and like is grateful and thinks that they're beautiful, and
I don't know. His dad was more pragmatic and more science-minded, I guess, and so he really did not appreciate that his son was exploring these 3 things simultaneously, to the extent that he said something along the lines of, if you're trying to believe everything, then you believe nothing. And as soon as he said that, I was pretty much done with all of the religious components, because that's the opposite of true.
right.
Like, all of these things exist on the planet simultaneously, which means that I have the capacity to understand them. It doesn't negate what I believe,
Mm-hmm.
or in any way, it's not detrimental to my own spiritual journey to learn about how you conceptualize freedom,
Uh-huh.
or love, or any of the other things that the movie tried to explore. It was very beautiful. There was a lot in it that was very visually appealing. It was well created, and I really enjoyed watching Pi struggle through his whole entire journey, and watching him kind of develop into that person that does believe that this tiger has a soul, right? Like, that part was intriguing.
Not in the book. That part was not in the book, which is fine. The movie can be a different thing. No, I don't know. I think in the book, the tiger is representative of Pi's, I don't know, will to survive? Or
yes,
something.
very much. Well, the dichotomy that we were presented with at the end, either, he was in the lifeboat with a hyena, an orangutan, and
Wounded zebra,
thank you, and a tiger, or he was, with people that ended up
doing
really awful things to each
bestial
other.
things.
Right, exactly. So, like, it's the comparison point from earlier in the storyline when his dad was talking about the soulless tiger, and he's not your friend,
Mm-hmm.
and he, he'll eat you, essentially. Mm-hmm. And basically it's like, well, either yes, he was in this life raft with these zoo animals, or he has those same embodied qualities as that tiger and was able to do what he needed to do to survive. So they're either the same in spirit or not, and that's up for you to decide at the end, basically.
He told his stories to, I don't know, in people who were trying to figure out what happened when the ship sank. And so he told the animal one, and then he told the one with the humans in it. And the question was more like, if it doesn't impact what you're doing, as far as, like, they were, I think, figuring out the insurance thing.
How to figure it, yep.
It doesn't impact anything that you're trying to do. It doesn't impact at all what your next move is. So, which is the better story?
Mm-hmm.
The dry, what did he call it? Yeastless factuality, or the one with the animals, basically. And so it read to me like, if it doesn't actually impact what you consider, like, how to be a good person or what your point in life is, then you might as well have some sort of faith in the unknown, spiritual, like, what's the better story? Like, just what story are you going to choose to believe? And I don't know. He also made some points about agnostics, like specifically, he talked about, okay, so he had his 3 spiritual leaders that he learned from. He had a 4th as well. He had a biology teacher who was a staunch atheist.
The same question of here's a story with animals and here's a story with people. It doesn't change my suffering. It doesn't change that this ship sank. It doesn't give anyone any more information. Which do you prefer? It was presented to the author that was writing the book.
Yeah.
So that same question is where the whole story ends. And it's basically, to me, religions use story, fable. They do that all the time to give whatever moral lesson is supposed to be learned. I don't understand what the moral of Life of Pi is. I don't know what I'm supposed to learn other than everyone is going to have differences, and it's going to be up to me to show up the way that I need to show up based on what life is throwing at me, which sometimes is going to be murderers and lifeboats.
I don't know. It's like, I feel like it was about religion. It was about whether you choose to believe in a religious philosophy or not. I feel like that was the point. That's the question at the end, is do you choose the story with the cool story with the animals or the one that looks more factual? But it's not a fair question. Both stories are like amazing feats of survival, and the author could have spent equal time with different stories, creating or interweaving these different versions of the stories if he was actually trying to ask the question, which, how do you want to do this? My argument is that both stories are interesting. But he led us through one. We're supposed to believe the one with the animals.
Right. No, I get that we're supposed to believe that, but like it was very much like unrealistic the whole entire time.
Yeah, for sure.
It's not.
My problem is that if you're going to end on an ambiguous philosophical ending, then it should be ambiguous. You shouldn't have to lead your audience by the nose to the result that you want them to be thinking. I kept comparing it to Ursula Le Guin, which is another one of those things that I'm probably going to talk about her frequently enough that we should have some sort of Ursula Le Guin cowbell every time I say her name. She is my favorite. She did a really great job of writing different viewpoints in such a way that there was not a clear, like, this is what she wants you to believe. She didn't lead you anywhere.
No, she was brilliant in presenting her ideas in a way that kind of just left it out there for you to be able to see that, if I shift my perspective slightly, then I can identify this way. And if I shift it back this way, then I can definitely see that other point. I feel like Life of Pi created a false dichotomy in the either-or mentality, which I felt was really ironic because Pi himself is following 4 different gurus. Yeah. So why are you now telling me that I have to... I don't know what you're actually telling me, actually.
So his 4 different gurus were Christian, Hindu, and... Muslim. Thank you. I
it's okay.
Blanked. And his atheist biology teacher, who were all 4 presented as being equally in love with life and enamored of the world and the wonder of everything, because of their firm beliefs in that this has been created by a vast and wonderful God, or that this has all been created by a vast and wonderful process, right? Equating these things. And then he presented being agnostic, of being just sort of choosing doubt as, I don't know, boring. And yeah, I don't know. Hang on. Let me access my notes and see if I actually took down what he.
But my problem with it is that Pi's belief system came from an amalgamation of these things that he lived through. So in that vein, all of my life experience should be equaling out to be my spiritual philosophy. It has nothing to do with the organized religion that those beliefs came from, because wasn't a staunch follower of any of those religions. He literally picked and chose what he identified with, what resonated, and he kept those practices, and he moved on.
In my opinion, you have to do that in religion. Like, I was flipping through your Skeptic's Annotated Bible, and how many places is it noted that it contradicts itself? You have to pick and choose.
That's one of the reasons that I chose to study my master's program at a Christian college. I wanted to see what the inside of that system would look like and how it compares to the liberal arts college that I got my bachelor's degree from. What the work looked like and what they wanted me to how they wanted me to contribute was completely different because of the philosophical and ideological things that backed up the things that we were supposed to be learning. The way that you engage with it is totally different. But it kind of then creates its own little bubble that it exists in, because it's only different in those specific ways in that specific environment, which I feel like is the same for this movie. Like, he can present these two ways of things happening or whatever, and then leave it up to the author or the reader to choose. But there's really no choice.
There's absolutely no choice, because he's led you by the nose. He's told you a fantastical story about this tiger, and you care about Richard Parker. And when the tiger goes off into the jungle without looking back, and he describes the pain of separation from Richard Parker, you care tremendously about it. It hurts you and you feel it, and then he's like, or it didn't happen, what do you think?
It's not or it didn't happen. It's that actually that was a part of myself that I had to divorce myself from when I found people again.
Right.
It's bringing it back into the reality of humans have those same innate instincts to survive, and yes, even if I have no weapons, I'm going to protect myself regardless of what's going on.
So no, it's not or it didn't happen. It's or the story is allegorical and the tiger is a symbol, and that's fine. He still leads you by the nose to a conclusion that, I don't know, you should believe things, or
yes, no, you're not wrong. Like, the whole entire thing is fanciful. I mean, the island that right? Like, they did a beautiful job with it, like, creating it visually for me to see. Like, it looks like a man from a distance, like, laying down prone, like, it's shaped. Like,
really?
The island itself looks like a dude. It reminded me of Moana, actually.
Really?
Yeah. And the whole concept of it was a floating oasis for them to be able to renew their hope, but it was a carnivorous island, so had he stayed, he would have ultimately just lived his life with no one but the tiger and meerkats, and his body would have went back to the island. I don't know.
Did he also have the floating Frenchman when he lost his vision and he found... Okay, you're looking at me like you're not sure. So at some point he had some sort of... It was not clear. His eyes started to itch and burn, and then he lost his sight. It had happened to Richard Parker before it happened to him. He was like, oh my god, he's blind. And then his eyes started itching and he went blind.
Oh, no, that part was not in the movie.
While he could not see, he encountered another castaway on another lifeboat who had also gone blind. Yeah, no. It's ratcheting the fanciful, like, coincidental up to
Jesus work.
11. He and this other blind castaway found each other, and the other, like, their vision started to come back a little bit. The other guy climbed onto his boat. They were talking about, I don't know, life and food. They talked about food because they were both starving. And they were like, well, now at least we're together. And he climbed onto his boat, and the other guy tried to kill Pi. Like, he was going to eat him.
Oh.
And then he fell and was eaten by Richard Parker.
Okay.
So the entire story is sort of episodic, but these episodes of the other castaway and the island, they reminded me again of, we talked about the book Pilgrim's Progress when we talked about Little Women. Yeah. It reminded me of the super religious allegorical stories that I grew up with. Mm-hmm. Like, there's an obvious moral message mm-hmm. about how when you're blind and at your lowest point, you can choose to, like, embrace brotherhood, or you can choose to be awful and try to kill people. And then if you do that, a tiger will eat you. Like, you know, a metaphorical tiger.
Right. The one that lives in my soul.
Right. Mm-hmm. Or, you know, you can, when you're at a low point and you find a potential oasis, but it's actually a poisoned well, you can choose to stay there and languish, or you can move on your whatever.
Continue your suffering.
Again, it felt very much like a Pilgrim's Progress, or I don't know. I can't recall the titles of the other ones, but yeah.
Yeah.
So again, it's like triggered all of my, like, nope because of my experience with religion. Uh-huh. I'm like, no, thank you. I don't want this.
I don't know. The Pi, as an adult, was presenting these stories to a writer, mm-hmm. Who they had a mutual friend, right? Mm-hmm. And the story was supposed to make the writer believe in God. Uh-huh. And so I knew that from the beginning, that that's what the purpose of this tale was going to be. And I'm still really confused about how this does that for people.
If the belief in God is believing in the animal story, I feel like because that specific line I'd forgotten, but that was in the book. I have a story that will make you believe in God. And then the writer goes to meet Pi, the adult survivor Pi, and hears the story. And then the end, we're left with the question, which story is better?
Which story makes you believe in God, basically?
The one with the animals or the one with the people? The one of dry, yeastless factuality.
Yes, but it's not dry. Like, if you would have told that story and said that you murdered the guy that just murdered your mom, that's not dry and yeastless. Nope. Okay? That's, like, how you present that to the world. So the fact that you want to divorce yourself from having had to do that or having lived through that, like, yes, that's very traumatic. I understand. Dissociation. I get it. But
it's not a story about trauma and dissociation.
It should be.
It could have. I would have liked it a lot better. It would have had more impactful things to say, I think, if that's actually what it was about. But it's not.
It didn't. It made it into an I believe in God story. And I don't, so he did an awful thing and dissociated from it. And that's why he believes in God. Am I wrong? Am I missing it? Please help me.
I don't even know.
Listen, I've had, there are so many gods that exist. I can't do the one true God thing. I can't. I'm sorry, not sorry. Just looking at history and seeing how many of these things have been presented to me as being foundational to someone's belief system, it makes me ponder then what their thoughts and feelings are, because if you believe... Never mind. Believe in yourself, guys. Like,
Believe
that's
in
the
yourself.
whole... That should be the moral of everything.
The
So I'm just
moral
going
of
to
the
reframe
story
that.
is that deep down inside, I'm a tiger.
And I'll fucking kill you.
So if deep down inside his, like, feral animal instinct is Richard Parker, then what is the significance of him teaching Richard Parker circus tricks?
Exactly!
Is that, like...
Yes! There we go. A much better question.
Yeah, that actually makes sense.
Uh-huh.
Stuff down your tiger deep down inside and make it do backflips. And
For food.
capitalism. Shit, did this just become about capitalism?
Everything is about capitalism in a capitalistic society. Hello. We didn't make it that way. We just have to participate.
I identify really strongly with Richard Parker.
That makes sense. I too would like to burn things down and eat people's faces off.
It's funny that he didn't, like, if that's what it is, if the story with the animals is a dissociation tale of trauma, he didn't actually disassociate completely from the things that he found horrifying. Because, like, the juxtaposition of a soft-spoken vegetarian Indian boy as opposed to, you know, a bloodthirsty Bengal tiger, he still was horrified at, like, dragging turtles into the boat and...
Yeah, I didn't have a turtle scene, but there was a fish scene where, like, he caught the giant fish and wrestled with it and then killed it and then prayed over it. And I'm like, full circle.
Yeah.
This is... Thank you, whoever, for coming in the form of a fish and allowing us to consume you. And I'm like, see? That's... It's very convenient to have more than one god, isn't it? Or not. Much more control. I don't know.
I don't know.
Really confused, actually.
I felt very much like this was a story that was designed to give the appearance of being thoughtful. Like, again, it felt smug to me.
It was pretty. Like, I really there was a scene at night where there was a whole bunch of bioluminescent stuff going on, and, like, there were a couple of scenes, like, he woke up one morning and the ocean was pristine, like, flat, crystal clear, and the sun is, like gorgeous, gorgeous things to look at.
Uh-huh. The writing was good, too. I really actually like the writer's style. I think I was reading a little bit about Yann Martel, and I think that he's, English is his second language. He's French-Canadian, and he speaks primarily French, but he writes in English. And I would not have guessed that English was not his first language. Because he wields it beautifully.
So as far as, like, the story goes and the actual content, like, I found it entertaining.
Mm-hmm.
But as anything other than entertainment, I don't think it holds any kind of water. There's no...
Yeah. It tries too hard to have a point, and
it doesn't.
Like...
It just doesn't. There's no...
It doesn't work for me either.
Yeah.
So, no.
I mean, had he not gone into as much detail with the true beige version or whatever, then more of it could have been left to my imagination, and then I could have had the fanciful version and whatever my brain could have put in to make that more realistic.
That's funny. That's the opposite, but I think equal sentiment that I had with he could have woven the two stories together in a way that made them both interesting. but also if he had left out more of the details of the
true events
the
that the
dry
insurance
one.
company
Yeah.
wanted.
The story without animals, that could have done the same thing. Yeah. Yep.
It takes out the leading by the nose, and it just
Mhm.
prevents this fanciful version of my experience, basically,
Mhm.
because it's his experience, and however he wants to express that, I agree that he should be able to do that the way that he wants to.
Mhm.
But then to have it all kind of outlined with another series of events, it just kind of makes it like, oh, well, this is pointless.
Well, it especially feels that way because I don't know why it was, but sometimes you read a book and you just care so much about the characters that they are the ones telling the story, and other times you read a book and it's very apparent that there's an author who does not share experiences with the characters that is telling you a story, and that is how this book read to me. Like, again, that's why I keep saying smug. It feels smug because it feels very much like the author is right there and he is making a point to his audience, and that supersedes the experience of the characters. And so I would love to empathize with Pi, the survivor of a traumatic event, and his dissociation with that traumatic event. I would care more about his three religions, and like his life experiences and his philosophies. But the author's intent is clear enough that it distracts me from the story. And
I think that makes a difference in the movie because we are hearing adult Pi tell his story.
Yeah.
That's a totally different thing than if the author were sitting there recounting the story.
We get the stories with adult Pi and the writer, the fictional writer. But those are told from the perspective of the writer.
The author. Right.
So it's still very much like
different.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's definitely a choice, and that's fine. But I wasn't into it.
The director, I think, then did a beautiful job of kind of removing that component, and I think that that's where visual storytelling really, the overtones aren't as blatant as when you have an author that has a voice and has a goal for the story arc.
Yeah. I mean, I bet it would be an absolutely beautiful movie. I don't know that I'm going to go out of my way to see it because I think that I've had just about enough of this story.
Yeah, no, not right now, but it's one of those ones that if you do get a chance to see it, just to be able to see the visual representation of how they put together that.
If the cinematography was good, it could be absolutely breathtaking because the whole thing takes place in like amazing.
Yes, places. Absolutely gorgeous scenery.
Yeah.
Like yes, there's a lot to look at. There's a lot going on there.
And there's a tiger. You gotta love that.
Holy shit! Yeah, there's a tiger. There's one scene where the tiger got so hungry that it jumped into the ocean to fish, and then it couldn't get back in the boat, and so Pi had to like essentially rescue Richard Parker from drowning.
Oh.
And I'm like, that's a choice right there.
That is a choice, isn't it? That was not lifted from the book.
No.
They chose that in lieu of the ridiculous over-the-top blind castaway.
He didn't make the movie.
He did not make it. Which, that's interesting to me because those are the two, like, really strong allegorical episodes that happen while he's on a lifeboat. And they removed one of them.
Okay.
It seems obvious to me that the filmmakers had different goals than the author.
They did. They made it much more about survival and the kind of trade-offs that you have to make sometimes when you're trying to stay true to yourself in that survival situation. Like Pi having to rescue Richard Parker.
Yeah.
Because, like, that whole scene, Pie's like trying to figure out how to fish, and he's like still trying to take responsibility for feeding this tiger,
Yeah.
and like he doesn't want the tiger to eat him.
Right.
And, like there's a whole bunch of stuff. So like he's got his raft that's attached to the lifeboat.
Yeah.
And the lifeboat is basically the tiger's, and he's got his own territory until the tiger jumps in the ocean. And oh, look, it's funny for a second because he's trying to fish, but also now there's a tiger in the water and I'm on a raft. So there's a holy shit moment, right? When the tiger turns and is now facing him, and he's like, I gotta get on the boat. But then he's on the boat and he's looking down at this tiger and it's just like a face in the water and he's got the big tiger eyes and you're like, ooh, it's like puppy eyes only with fangs. And he's like, all right, hold on, and like figures out a whole system for getting the tiger back in the boat and him onto his raft. And getting himself onto the raft, though, he also moved all of his supplies onto the raft, which I thought immediately was very stupid. I'm not gonna lie.
Uh-huh.
And then in the bioluminescent scene, when he's playing in the water that's lighting up comes a giant whale. And then crashes the raft and he loses all his food and water. And then he himself says that was a very stupid thing to do. So I felt better.
I feel very validated by this character's struggles to survive.
I do.
And I'm over here like, I like the big kitty with fangs.
I mean, same.
I feel that.
So, no, it was like him wrestling with his own decision making and then living with those consequences. So they didn't need a blind guide that wanted to eat him.
Right.
Because they were able to do that same kind of life or death thing, or ratcheting up the trauma, or bringing in more intensity or whatever.
Yep.
By manufacturing it that way.
Mm-hmm. Well, it sounds like it was a well done movie.
Yeah, and aside from like a few points like that, it seems like they stuck really well to kind of the storyline, and it definitely opened and closed the same. So basically his journey was slightly different based on what they wanted me to visually see, opposed to what your author needed you to hear.
Yeah.
I think that the director was able to take out a lot of those stronger religious overtones and leave it to be a more
about humanity.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. I like that. I don't know. It sounds like it was well done, but like I said, I am done with this story. It took me a week longer to read it than I thought it would because it took me a long time to slog through it. The first half was in India before they left, so it was just the author making points about the nature of freedom, and I don't know.
Yeah, we got a lot of Pie's backstory though. Like we saw that his dad was a business guy and he was running the zoo, but like as a business. And we saw Pie interacting with his swim instructor, and we saw Pie meeting a girl for the first time. And so we saw a lot of like his growing up and the lessons that he was learning throughout those interactions. And what I really thought was interesting is that a lot of that stuff, like the early background stuff, ended up coming into his decision making, or at least the thought processing that we got to hear about while he's stranded on the ocean.
So we get essentially the same thing in the book, but the things that apply to the situation are more the philosophical things. One quote that I took directly from the book, because I wanted to remember it, he was talking about the concept of animals in the zoo and people wanting to free them, but they wouldn't be happy if they were freed, like they're safe, like that safety versus freedom dichotomy, false dichotomy. I know zoos are no longer in people's good graces. Religion faces the same problem. Certain illusions about freedom plague both of them.
Up until the 60s, zoos in Belgium had black people in them. So, like, if there's any, like, question about whether zoos are good or bad. They're bad.
So the point that he's making, again, if it's about animals in captivity, then like the points he's making are bizarre, and yes. not and anything. If the points are bizarre and don't make sense. If he's talking about zoos as an analogy for religion, I'm even more
confused
and opposed to his morals. So we get all of his stories have some sort of philosophical theme, and then that factors into how he behaves or gets called back in some way during the second act when he's on the lifeboat.
Okay.
So it was very, very heavy in metaphor, and I didn't like it.
That's okay.
It is.
Mm-hmm.
I want to like stuff like this. I'm like, I'm a smart person. I can get it. I can follow along. And
yeah, you can. Those things are not the problem.
No, it's not. But it makes, like, that whole smug, I'm saying something without saying it allegory is, like, it makes you want to keep up and, like, get it and feel clever. And it frustrates me because that's not why I'm reading I'm not reading this to feel clever, and I think that you wrote it to feel clever, and I don't like it.
Yeah, no, I'm, like, the movie was purely for entertainment, which I think is why it's easier for me to watch movies, because there are a lot of undertones like that in a lot of different novels for a lot of different reasons.
The whole reason that we're doing this podcast, the reason that I started my blog, is because the underlying themes that the author believes are already in the work, whether you intend it to be or not. And I want to talk about that. When it's overt, it's, I don't know, it's not as fun.
No, but there we go. Like, overtly bringing in the religious concept and saying that this is a story that will make you believe in God automatically makes me question your belief.
Yeah. Yep. And say, why are you trying so hard to convince me of this thing?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I'm not trying to convince anybody of anything.
That's not my job. I refuse to do that. I wholeheartedly believe that we all have the capacity to learn and grow and come to our own conclusions. And if we all just have that space, then great things happen. I really, really enjoyed the visual representations that this movie gave for a lot of the struggling that this little boy went through. I mean, because he's just a kid. And it's a whole lot of life stuff that he's dealing with.
Uh-huh.
So I really enjoyed being entertained by it. But the second that I try to use my brain, the whole thing is just much less appealing.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah.
All right. Well, audience, did you see the movie or read the book or make your way through a book or movie that you weren't sure you wanted to and then did and were relieved that it was over? Or is that just me?
I don't think it's just you. But I do want you guys out there to let us know in the comments or in our Facebook group what your experience has been. And we will be back next week talking about The Call of the Wild.
That's going to be fun.
Thanks for listening. You can join the conversation in our Facebook group. The page, facebook.com/realbooked, will direct you there.
If you want to support us and get more content, find us on Patreon. And you can always email us directly at realbooked@gmail.com. There will be links in the transcript.
All music in this episode provided by purple-planet.com.
Hope we hear from you soon.